Hello there! It is another Tuesday, which of course means it's time for another in real life video. This week we are going back to sort of alternating between taking questions submitted from gentle viewers like you, as well as taking requests for ranking videos, which this is a ranking video. And as per usual, feel free to submit your own requests for ranking videos and submit your own requests or your own questions in the comments below. On both counts, helps a bunch if you include a question mark for the sake of finding and sorting them into a list. Also, sometimes we do topical stuff if it comes up and whatnot, or sort of spin-offs of previous things, which this is this week. This is actually a bit of a continuation, a follow-up of a previous ranking video wherein we were asked and we received a request to rank the major quest arcs of Skyrim. And I believe I said in that we say this a lot in a lot of the game specific ones when it comes to like Elder Scrolls or Fallout or whatever. But I did say, hey, we should probably do this for the other games as well. And then maybe even at the end, consider doing them all together. But regardless, for this week, we are ranking the major quest arcs as they appear in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Also including the DLC, Knights of the Nine and the Shivering Isles. Consider those major quest arcs. As per usual, thanks to UESP.net, the illustrious, long-running, unofficial Elder Scrolls pages.net, the wiki, the fan-run wiki. It's super good. A lot of the images, actually every image is taken from their incredible wiki. Highly recommend them. Also, these are featuring like a mishmash, I would say, of a combination of original Oblivion and the remaster of last year. But either way, there was no real meaningful impact on the quests themselves, just like, you know, how they're depicted in the imagery involved. Anyway, also, I almost forgot, we mentioned this last time when we did the Skyrim one. Included in this, we're also going to include the Daedra quests, which I don't necessarily agree with the idea of including them there. But it's sort of me nipping it in the butt, because I imagine if I do this without having Daedra quests, just as like an amalgamation, I will get people saying that it should be on there. I don't think it should be, actually, but I'll do it nonetheless. But bear that in mind, there's no like narrative arc, there's no narrative through line between each Daedra quest, but they are something of a staple in the franchise. Anyway, without further ado, we will do a brief cut here as we swap into picture-in-picture mode and do a fun little stupid ranking. Of course, it's always subjective, not terribly serious, right? Unless you want it to be. All right, see you after the cut. All right, welcome back. As you can see here, there's not very many, but there's a decent amount of stuff to talk about and speak on here about all of these and sort of different things to consider when we're ranking them. I guess we'll start at where we all start, that being with the main quest. How should we rank Oblivion's main quest? I think Oblivion's main quest, its worst sin is being a little boring and uninteresting. There's no like major amount of intrigue, even though there is some setup for intrigue around like the location of the cult of the Mythic Dawn in their involvement. It seems as if there would be a lot of room for intrigue about like, oh, who is and isn't like a member of the Mythic Dawn, right? But at the end of the day, the only major twists on that are people who are inside various towns or whatever, right? Various people who you would have gone by, like what's her name? Elsa God Eater or God Hater or whatever it was. People oftentimes with very sinister sounding names would turn out to actually be down for Lord Dagon. I think one of that's unmistakably one of the biggest missed opportunities with that, especially for a game set in Cyrodiil, the province of Cyrodiil, which is inclusive of the Imperial City, that there's no real Elder Council intrigue. There's no, right? It practically writes itself, wherein you could have various members of the Elder Council or representatives from different provinces, all manner of shenanigans of politicking back and forth, who is or isn't in favor of the Mythic Dawn, who is maybe playing a useful patsy, who is standing true and blue against their oncoming like apocalypse. You don't really get any of that. They all kind of just screw off and never appear on screen, save for Chancellor Akado, who he himself, it almost seems as if there was set up for him to like be a turncoat, to actually in truth be like an agent of the Mythic Dawn. But at the end of the day, he's not. Right? He's actually not. Which, by the way, I guess maybe a little late for this, but of course, we're talking about quest arcs. There's going to be major spoilers here that we're going to speak on, I would imagine. Anyway, it's kind of a very straightforward good versus evil tale, right? There's very little afforded in the way of nuance. I think the most nuance you get is Martin Septim having a background as a daedrologist, as being like a Daedric cultist himself under Sanguine, right? But even that exists really on the periphery. There's a few times that Martin brings it up. I think initially around when you first meet him, maybe Joffrey also mentions it on the offhand. And then when you go to collect a Daedric artifact to sacrifice for Martin to use, he also can bring it up then, in particular, if you speak to him about Sanguine. That's kind of neat, but like I said, unfortunately, it's not used to great effect. Martin Septim himself is incredibly lovable, which I think makes it all the worse that there's so little intriguing conflict, right? Like, they really succeed at making this dude super duper likable, but there's no real hardship for him aside from this more like amorphous, like divorced from everything. It feels like the Oblivion Crisis feels more like a force of nature, and Mankar Cameron as a villain is woefully underutilized, I would say. Mankar Cameron gets so little villain development. It's kind of absurd. It's kind of absurd just how uncompelling of a villain he is. In some of these other quest arcs, there are far more compelling villains, right? Martin Septim's greatest downfall is that he didn't have an interesting villain to go up against. You know, there was nothing that compelling. You certainly cannot make a case for Mehrunes Dagon being that villain, because Mehrunes Dagon is even more a force of nature than the Mythic Dawn is presented. You know, Mankar Cameron could have been a whole lot, and I get why they probably wouldn't go that route, because a lot of his stuff would lean into like storytelling and world building that just isn't present in this game. It would date back to like the time of the Simulacrum, stuff with the Cameron dynasty, and they just don't really get into it. And conversely, same goes for like the rest of the Dragonborn bloodline. You know, if we want to get into stuff with that, you eventually go to like the final resting place of Tiber Septim to retrieve a MacGuffin for the sake of the quest, no? And it's very much just a one-off. You know, there's very little fanfare given to it for how important a lot of this ought to be. You know, it's very much like swept under the rug and made into just sort of, you know, a hero's journey, right? It's fairly, it's cool in the moment when you're going into it. You know, it's a great main quest arc if you're brand new to the Elder Scrolls. If this is like your first Elder Scrolls game and you don't know anything about any of this world, it's fantastic for that. It's a great introduction because it doesn't overload you with details and callbacks to like esoteric stuff from games of yore, or even from just world building that existed and was like devised more recently, or was maybe even built upon in this very game in Oblivion. But if you especially hear about, if you played Skyrim, for instance, and this will probably come up later, but for instance, if you played Skyrim first and you go back to Oblivion, and Skyrim makes you very aware of Tiber Septim and Talos to a major degree, and does so much for like the player consciousness around the mythos of this character, that when you actually do go to Cyrodiil in the previous game, you may have it built up like into a far larger event and more exciting event. And what's there just isn't that much of a thrill, right? It is not that exciting. Another thing which which I don't really care for with Oblivion's main quest is the portrayal of the Blades. They're very much done as like the heroes of the day. A lot of the nuance and complexity which was afforded to them in Morrowind, or alternatively, go the other direction, nuance and complexity afforded to them in Skyrim simply does not exist in Oblivion. They are effectively like the CIA, the secret police, or whatever you want, of the Tamrielic Empire, right? They go around like fixing problems and making sure things play out a certain way in the favor of the Empire. Here, of course, I mean, it's a decent justification for them to be used as mostly just heroes and like being heroic. But it's such a missed opportunity. Like I said, no matter which direction you go, if you had played Morrowind prior, there's so much cool stuff involving the Blades, and in particular, Caius, your main contact with the Blades, that's super intriguing and making you second guess like this guy's own motives as well as the motives of the organization, and ultimately what happens to him. Why is he not in Oblivion? You know, why isn't he in Cyrodiil when you go and look? There's a lot of really cool intrigue there, but Oblivion, the game, is so like rah, let's go the Tamrielic Empire. There's hardly ever any major critique levied at like any of the problems of the Tamrielic Empire. It's mostly just made in passing. This is one of my big hangups of Oblivion in totality, is that there's very little in the way of some of the like delicious culture clash that you often would get in Morrowind or in Skyrim, you know? The themes of this being like an imperialist nation, right? Very much go out the window in favor of there's an overwhelmingly evil force out there. It's literally demons pouring out of like a fiery hellish like gate all around the countryside, and everyone is under attack. Thus everyone is rallying around the Empire, and they are the big damn heroes of the day. There's very little room for any sort of nuance or intrigue whatsoever. All that is completely out the window, and it's, in my opinion, it's a huge disappointment. I don't think Martin Septim and like the character work, I think, is very good for our protagonists. For Martin, I find Martin Septim very likable. I enjoy Joffrey. I love Boris. But I don't know that the three of them make up for everything else. You know, I don't know that them being cool to hang out with and to just travel around with and all that, I don't think that saves the rest of it that much. You know, there are some cool, there's very cool set pieces and all of that, but some of it is also similarly like let down by a lot of the technological limitations of the time. So I'm hesitant to like mark them off on that. Maybe the most egregious example is the Great Gate that appears outside of what's it called? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it. The Blades Temple and oh my gosh, Bruma. Outside of there, the big like battle where Martin Septim like delivers his rousing speech to everybody. It's not that amazing to behold. It's a little bit of a letdown. What is cool though, what is super cool are the early parts of it. Although I do wish that there was stuff with like the Elder Council involved and them being outed as secret cultists. I do enjoy the Mythic Dawn sort of reappearing in town with, you know, you go by an otherwise familiar NPC and, oh, turns out they're a cultist, right? They start screaming, I do not fear death for Lord Dagon, all that fun stuff. I do like that. That said, it is also somewhat retreading familiar territory. This completely existed as a concept in Morrowind to the T. There were like sleeper agents that awoke, and I would argue that the political intrigue involved around that and the like what it's saying on a metatextual level of these people being asleep and waking up and all of that, so to speak. I think that was so much more effective as like a literary device than what's going on here with the Mythic Dawn cult and their sort of sleeper agents being activated. I find it was just done better in Morrowind. As much as I enjoy it here, I do think Morrowind pulled it off significantly better. What else is there? There's the interesting puzzle solving that you get kind of like in the early the first half of the main quest. That's somewhat fun, where you have to figure out the Green Emperor Way business. That's enjoyable. Going to Paradise is super duper cool. Is Paradise the biggest set piece aside from like the Imperial City in ruins in the very final quest? I think so. Paradise is very cool, made even cooler in the remaster, I think. I think I'm on record saying that I think the remaster does very good with enhancing natural environments. I think that, or just environmental stuff in general, it tends to be a lot better at, you know? The natural environment I was decently impressed with. And that, I think the shining example of that is Paradise when you do go there. Which also such a shame that like Mankar Cameron is so uncompelling of a villain within the game itself when he ought to be so much more. I think it's telling how little he came up during us discussing the main quest. So I gotta say, I feel like it's low ranking. I don't really care for the main quest. It's, if anything, I think it's emblematic of where the game sort of stood even at the peak of its popularity when it came out. It's one of those games that comes out and you hear people say, oh, I haven't even touched the main quest. You know, I went and signed up with whatever guild. Oh, I went into a whole bunch of caves. I just killed everyone in Breville, right? You hear about stuff like that. You don't hear, a lot of people would say like, yeah, I did just skipped over the main quest. Or I did power gaming. I have it to where like Martin Septim is an unkillable NPC and he's following me around the game world helping me kill everything. Stuff like that. I kept the main quest stuck at a specific point in time. That way I could clear it on the highest difficulty possible. You know, that kind of thing. The main quest, kind of a disappointment. I'm gonna, let's be ballsy with it. It's a C ranker. I don't care for it. Its saving graces are that the more goodly characters, your protagonists, your buds, are very likable. I enjoy them a lot. But otherwise, if whatever direction you're coming from, like I said, if you're coming from Skyrim or if you're coming from Morrowind, I think it's a little bit disappointing. I think it's a little disappointing, especially if you've played those games and you know, holy cow, we're in Cyrodiil. Main story quest in Cyrodiil involving the Imperial City. A lot of politicking could be on display, a lot of intrigue surrounding the different provinces, uneasy alliances, people aren't actually who they say they are, stuff like that. You don't get any of that. You don't get any of that. It sucks. It sucks so much what could have been. All right. Well, let us start with some of these guilds. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, yeah, let's start with the guilds. Why not? F it. Why not? Let's see. I guess we'll just start here with, oh, you know what? Who I forgot to have on here? I forgot to have the Thieves Guild. Oh my gosh. I even made an image for the Thieves Guild. Didn't I? Yeah, I did. All right, hang on. We'll do a quick cut here. We'll do a quick cut as I add it to our list. All right, sorry about that. There we are. Got the Thieves Guild listed right there. So I figure, hey, why not? Speaking of like clandestine organizations and big reveals of who is and isn't who, let's go with the Thieves Guild, marked by the presence of the Grey Fox. And sort of renowned within Elder Scrolls Pantheon, this iteration of the Thieves Guild being one of the most openly Robin Hood-esque, wherein a lot of the thieving that they do is very much like helping out those who are either poor, destitute, or just unfortunate or whatever. Until it isn't. until you start doing quests for the Grey Fox, in which case it is entirely just serving the Grey Fox. But before that, I very much enjoy the Thieves Guild, right? If we're to separate the Thieves Guild into maybe halves, or I guess you could do quarters. 3/4 of it is doing quests for like your various contacts and all of that, or even joining up the guild. You get all the interesting stuff with Methradel. You get cool stuff where I suppose less cool stuff when you finding out and learning of the Grey Fox, super cool, you know, super cool capstone on otherwise decently neat thieving quests. You know, they're decently fun. But maybe more so is what's memorable are the ones in the Imperial City. I do enjoy those a whole lot, wherein you're targeting the Imperial Legion and the corrupt guards. I do enjoy that a whole lot, and it fits very well with the overarching sort of, like I said, Robin Hood-esque Thieves Guild storyline. I think things start to suck a bit once we get to the Grey Fox. As iconic as the Grey Fox is as a character, I think they kind of suck, right? There's not like a cool lesson. The entire quest line just kind of begins to pivot around the identity of the Grey Fox. Who is this mysterious person? What are they planning? And it's fun, but there's no like interesting narrative through line. There's no cool story at the end of this, it feels like, unless I'm just like misreading and misfiring on it. But you go from sort of helping out all these disenfranchised people and trying to help them, and you go like pointing out the corruption with the various like guards in different towns, and in particular, what's his name? Not Hermaeus Mora. Hieronymus Lex in the Imperial City. All of the stuff involving Hieronymus Lex is so good. Frankly, if the Thieves Guild arc ended with you taking down Hieronymus Lex and getting him like completely expelled and removed and like dishonorably discharged, that would be excellent. I feel like that would tie everything up in such a nice little bow, and it would be such a fantastic narrative through line, and everything would like thematically add up with the Thieves Guild of Oblivion. Unfortunately, like I said, that's just not the case, because so much of it in the last quarter or last third pivots around the super heist. around getting the Elder Scroll, around the Gray Fox, which is such a cool concept on paper, right? That the finale of the of the Elder Scrolls of the Thieves Guild in Oblivion is to steal an Elder Scroll. That sounds super cool, and it works amazingly well with like the location. You know, we were just critiquing the main quest for not making as much use of being said in Cyrodiil, including the Imperial City. Well, here we have the Thieves Guild sort of making use of that, involving you breaking into the place with all the Blind Moth priests, breaking into the vault of the Elder Scrolls, at least the ones that have been accumulated, and actually taking one to use. That's super neat. I like that a lot, but the problem is that it feels so narratively divorced from everything that the first half, if we're being conservative, of the quest arc is about, you know, which predominantly deals with helping out those who have been less lucky or less fortunate than yourself. In some ways, it tries to get around to that, I guess. You could say that, like, you're helping out Count Umbranox get back to his former life and helping out his wife and all of that. But it severely pales in comparison to what you're doing with the rest of it. You know, I feel like Hieronymus Lex was such a fantastic villainous character, and he's completely, like, discarded part of the way through. I would have loved the idea of, like, when you send him to Anvil, he strikes back in some way. You know, he continues to be relevant, and the only way to fully deal with him is to either, like I said, get him completely discharged from the Legion or fight him, right? You have to fight him. Hieronymus Lex is, I think, one of the better... We were just talking about how lackluster Mankar Cameron is. I think Hieronymus Lex is a better villain and is a more compelling villain than fucking Mankar Cameron, right? If we're doing a ranking video, let's do some fucking hot takes. Hieronymus Lex absolutely clears Mankar Cameron when it comes to being a villain. Let alone some other villains. I think Hieronymus Lex, severely underappreciated villain, works so well in tandem, like I'd said, with what the main through line was of the Thieves Guild in the first 2/3 roughly. But when we start dealing with the Gray Fox himself, he just sucks. He's not terribly likable. Of course, he has to be so obtuse and reclusive and everything. And I do enjoy the idea of, like, you're building up to the big heist. You're collecting all of these doodads and MacGuffins. You're getting everything in place. You know, like, you go get the boots of Spring Heel Jack. But it just feels so banal compared to what the beginnings of the quest arc were about. You know, it feels so uninteresting. It's so uncompelling relative to what everything else was, like, hitting on. I feel like it could have been so much more if in some way the Gray Fox was, like, I don't know, a more kindly character, or in some way was a little, like, the ultimate goal of the Gray Fox, and when you meet them, is maybe less self-serving, because it just feels like, yeah, we're just helping out the Gray Fox now. Everything that we're doing, it's now just in favor of the Gray Fox. Oh, great, we can kill during these quests when we go fight Spring Heel Jack, when we go to the Blind Moth Priest to get that stupid rock. You just then suddenly out of nowhere, whoops, don't worry about the Thieves Guild's whole situation where they try not to kill anyone, where it's bad, it's against the rules to kill. They're thieves first. They aren't the Dark Brotherhood. They steal stuff, they sneak away or run away. All that gets thrown out the window, and you're suddenly just like, yeah, just kill them. If you get caught, you have my permission to spill blood. What the fuck are we doing? What are we doing? We're breaking away from what was so cool about the first half, 2/3 of the whole quest arc, I feel. It stinks. I don't care how iconic the Gray Fox is and how memorable and useful getting that cowl is at the end of it all. Dude sucks ass. And on a narrative level, uh, the quest arc, the storyline of the Oblivion Thieves Guild becomes significantly worse once you start getting orders from this dude. It sucks ass so much. It completely, like I said, it goes against all of what it was building up toward. I'm super not into it. And you're sort of left riding what carries it and makes it not shitty is the fact that the stakes suddenly start like exponentially soaring through the roof, right? You're breaking into these otherwise like, or into these locations that have immense amounts of lore and world building surrounding them, right? Like dealing with the blind moth priests, maybe less so Springheel Jack, right? But certainly going into the Imperial City, breaking into the tower, getting an Elder Scroll, all of that is super cool and is heavily loaded for people who know about the Elder Scrolls, who know about the games. That's super good, but I feel like we sometimes get caught up in all of that. We miss, or we forget that like what came before was actually like good writing, right? But then we get into stuff with the damn Gray Fox, where suddenly all restrictions are lifted and you can just kill willy-nilly. And it stinks, man. It kind of stinks. I don't care for it. I don't think it's handled very well. As cool as it is, it's easy to get distracted and say like, yeah, it carries it though. Come on, you steal an Elder Scroll at the end. Jeez, are you 10 years old? You're brought in by the flashing lights of stealing an Elder Scroll? Come on. Just make a damn mod where you steal an Elder Scroll. Don't matter. They were making something there. They were cooking something with what they were doing with the Thieves Guild versus Hieronymus Lex. That shit was intriguing. The stuff with Hieronymus Lex could have been so much more. It was already very good. And then suddenly we got to give a damn about this dude just because he's got a cool hat? Come on. Fuck out of here. I gotta say, Thieves Guild probably B rank, right? Maybe if that went in reverse order, like it was front loaded with being kind of dog shit, and then like after the first third, it begins to find its identity and then starts to like deliver narratively in that way, I would be more convinced to give it like an A rank. Right? If it has a better ending than beginning. But it's the other way around, you know? It leaves a sour taste in my mouth. As interesting and intriguing as going through some of that is, like lifting the curse and whatnot, that's fun. You're dealing with like supernatural forces and beings and all that, right? Literally dealing with Nocturnal. But I find it to be, like, narratively speaking, a bit of a letdown, you know? A bit of a letdown. I'm not wowed or taken in by the astonishment of stealing an Elder Scroll, of dealing with this mysterious figure called the Gray Fox, you know? I don't know. Maybe way back when it first came out, that would have gotten me. That would have been enough. Not today, though. All right. Let's sort of look at the opposite of that, I think. The Fighters Guild. The Fighters Guild, in my opinion, is severely underrated. Right? Just to get out of the way, this is going to be a high-ranking one. This is a guild wherein I think a lot of people rate them lower because you're doing mostly mundane things. You're dealing with more mundane activities, you know, oh, deal with some rats or whatever, right? Oh, wait, I love the rats. That's funny. It's actually cougars we gotta deal with, right? Or going out to help, what's their name's daughter? Rescuing Rugdump's daughter, and he's like a weird kooky character. There is all of this ancillary stuff. And the biggest shame of the Fighters Guild, I think, is maybe that there's so many guild halls that exist in the game, but there's nothing going on in like half of them. Right? There's not a single quest that you get. I think it's just Anvil, Coral, and what's the other one? What's the other one that offers you up a whole bunch of quests? Is it Breville? No, Leowin. Isn't it Leowin? It might be Leowin. I'm not sure. I forget. But either way, some of them feel more like bog standard Fighters Guild stuff, you know? But then, about halfway through, you meet a motherfucker named Modron Orain, or Orion, as I like to call him. I actually, yeah. Yeah, he is actually called Modron Orion, right? Yeah, I faked myself out. I tricked myself into thinking I've been saying it the wrong way, but he is actually called Modron Orion, no? Either way, I absolutely love this guy. Fantastic, I think, character work in the Oblivion Fighters Guild by way of introducing the current standing guildmaster, who is maybe a little feckless. She isn't super duper good at what she's doing and is maybe helicopter parenting her son, who is seeking like great adventure, and things sort of go awry when he's out on a job, and you have multiple run-ins with him, right? It's not just like a one and done quest where you meet these characters, but you encounter, what's her name? Something Danton, and her son, and you ultimately help him go on a quest, and he dies during he dies during the questing. And I think that's super good. And even better is that there is actual punishment levied against you and Modron Orion, who you begin to foster like this cool friendship with Modron Orion. There's also a bit of a, what would you even call it? A counter to Modron Orion, a fluke, a flaw, just a sinister, villainous little guy. That being Maglier, right? The up and comer, the excited little peppy freak, Maglier, signs up with the guild. You work with him a few times, and eventually you hear that this guy quits. He quits in favor of the not Blackwater, though certainly you would think that might be what they're getting at, right? What is the name of the rival guild, or like a mercenary company? It's like Blackwood, the Blackwood Company. Yeah, it might be Blackwood. Either way, I do very much love them as like a villainous force. They don't have just like one thorough villain, but I think Maglier kind of works as that well enough. The internal politicking within the Fighters Guild is sufficient for me, and sort of like rallying everyone, trying to get them just work, right? It's a interestingly labor-centric storyline about labor and sort of another company rolling up in and doing a lot of like unethical shit. Like I said, the namesake might be a little on the nose, right? They may really be leaning into the Blackwater shit. I don't know. But either way, it's super good. I very much enjoy it. You end up doing like, as far as a mercenary group is concerned, borderline, like, if it weren't a war, or if it were a war, it would be a war crime, wherein you take the hist stuff and you start tripping out and you kill a whole town of civilians thinking that they were goblins because you were tripping on hist. That is so dope. And you get a little bit of the hist tie-in. It's some of the rare modicum of Argonian Blackmarsh tie-in with Oblivion, wherein they're right next door, and yet there's hardly anything to do with Argonians on a cultural level aside from this. This is maybe predominantly the main through line of it. But it's so cool finding out about the history there. I think maybe the history is weird and feels like very non sequitur if you're unfamiliar with Elder Scrolls. If this is like your first Elder Scrolls game, you're like, what the hell? This tree is making me like lose my shit. It's fucking people up big time, right? Maybe that's a little weird, but I think that's extremely cool. And even if it is an unfamiliar concept to you, I think having you like start tripping out and, going out and killing all the people in Lightwatch, or what was the name of that town that you go wipe out with your guildmates when you're infiltrating the Blackwood Company? Either way, just amazing stuff all around. Amazing character work. Having another encounter with Maglier again back at the Blackwood Company toward the end of it. I think it's super good. There's like a really like absurd action sequence interrogation scene where you rough up a prisoner and beat the crap out of him. And the final reward that puts the icing on the cake of the friendship that you have with Modron Orion is getting to see his silly little painting right at the end. It's fantastic. It's incredibly memorable. I absolutely love the Fighters Guild. I think it's exceptional. I think it's one of my favorite quest arcs in Oblivion. I absolutely love it. I think there's fantastic characters all around. It's an A ranker for sure. No doubt about it. All right. Now, let's round things out with the Mages Guild. We spoke on this with the Thieves Guild, how, and, I mean, frankly, we spoke on this with the Fighters Guild, how there's no major antagonistic force. Shit, we spoke on this with the main quest, how Mankar Cameron maybe doesn't live up to the name, how Mankar Cameron is a bit of a letdown. That sort of happens again with the Mages Guild, wherein ultimately, once you get to the Arcane University, you hear about Mana Marco, who is, especially if you've played ESO, right? Who is a sort of legendary figure. But even if you haven't played ESO, if you've paid attention to like world building, or even as they describe it in this game, Mana Marco is like a force to be reckoned with. He's like the ultimate necromancer dude. And he is so severely mishandled by the second half of the Mages Guild quest arc. They do a decent job of hyping him up and everything. It's so cool the way in which one of the Mages Guild locations gets completely burnt up and annihilated. That is amazing. It's so cool the way in which you find out, oh, there's like this civil war within the Mages Guild, I don't know, leadership, wherein some of the guild heads are more so loyal to Hannibal Traven, others more so loyal to, or is it Hannibal Traven or Romanus Polus? I forget. But others who are more so loyal to Mana Marco, and you learn about the politicking of necromancy having been recently outlawed and forbidden within the Mages Guild, and there's like this huge divide. I think that stuff is super good. The big letdown, though, is in the encounter of Mana Marco, it being like pretty boring, and you don't really need a whole lot to take him out at all. But I think maybe, am I willing to overlook? Maybe I'm not willing to fully overlook it, but the way in which Mana Marco goes out is such a letdown, but everything else about it, I don't think that's the fault of the writing. That's more so like on a mechanical level, you know? Because you do have to sacrifice, what's his name's soul, Raminus Polus, or whoever it was. You have to sacrifice their soul in like the super black soul gem to even fight him. Like I said, he works great as a villain, wherein you get teases of his actions, people talking about him. When he shows up to the Bruma Mages Guild, that gets completely torched. Some of the like more fledgling guild members are like, yeah, I saw him. He looked at me right in the eyes. He was terrifying. Mana Marco. No, it was very good stuff. And then the introductory quests for the Mages Guild are super fun as well, wherein you get the recommendations and all of that. And after that, the second half of the Mages Guild, after you like accrue all the recommendations, it starts to make sense. Oh, now I understand why some of these people that I had to get recommendations from were a little weird and had me doing kind of messed up stuff, right? It's super fascinating. It's super good, I think. The only major shame of it is that there's no significant set pieces really whatsoever beyond, like, I guess the Arcane University and the guilds themselves. It would have been so much cooler if there were if there were something more exciting to fight Mannimarco at in the end than just a big cave with a whole bunch of like bone stuff everywhere, you know? Another criticism I guess I have is maybe the whole Black Soul Gem stuff is maybe a little needlessly draconic or archaic or esoteric, if you will. It's just complex. It's too complicated to like get the soul gem, wait for a specific day when the beam of light is there, convert it into a black soul gem. Ain't nobody gonna go out of their way to do that another time after you accomplish or complete that specific quest where you have to do it once. I don't think anybody's going out of their way to do that. If anything, I'm shocked that one of the DLC plugins for like maybe the Mage Tower or whatever, or even like the more Dark Brotherhood related one, some sort of DLC plugin for one of the home bases, I'm surprised it didn't just have like an easy, ready to go Grand Soul Gem to Black Soul Gem converter, because it's so annoying to do it in the core game, and having a Black Soul Gem is super useful. I don't know. But I do enjoy the Mages Guild a decent amount. I do enjoy it a decent amount. It's just such a shame that Mannimarco does not live up to the hype. It's such a big shame how unfortunate it is. But they do such a fantastic job establishing Mannimarco as this villainous force. Showing up even when you do the mage staff, when you go to those woods on the little islet to go chop some lumber to fashion into a staff. You even get the attack out there from the necromancers and all of that. And it dovetails pretty well into some other side quests, like involving Irana and the Fingers of the Mountain. That sort of links up nicely with some of the stuff with the Mages Guild and her standing out there weirdly. It's not terrible. I quite like it a bit. I don't find some of the more allied characters like Raminus Polus, Hannibal Traven. Am I even thinking of the right guy? I find them to be very uncompelling. You know, I find them to be very uninteresting. If anything, some of the other guild heads at the different guild halls I find more compelling, like what's her name? The Argonian lady. She's incredibly sweet. Ochiva, is it? Am I thinking of the correct person? Ochiva? Also, there's what's her butt and her assistant, who she's having the memory loss, but also at the same time she's having some sort of like supernatural divination power kicking off. And some of that is thwarted by, what's his name? Eyebrows McGillicuddy, who shows up at the end and tries to take you out. Once again, establishing this sort of like splinter group of necromancers from the Mages Guild as being super interesting, super compelling, right? It works out very well, I think. You know what? I'm selling myself in the Mages Guild. Originally, I was thinking B rank, but I think the Mages Guild, there's no cool set pieces, though. You know? It's really lacking in a set piece. The coolest thing you got going on, I guess, is the Arcane University, but it's not like you just go there anytime, you know? There's the Burning Bruma Mages Guild Hall. That's kind of neat. Yeah. I think the Mages Guild is lacking a big set piece and a satisfying, like, send-off for Mannimarco. You know? I think that it could have been a little bit better, but you know what? A rank for Mages Guild. I did enjoy it. All right. Finally, let's bring up, they're not a guild by name, but, you know, we always associate them with them. That being the Dark Brotherhood, which the Dark Brotherhood here, as far as I know, this is their first fully fledged quest arc. In Morrowind, you don't have the Dark Brotherhood. Rather, you have their, like, I guess their sister guild. That being, or sister organization, the Morag Tong, which is sort of the progenitor in some ways to the Dark Brotherhood. But here you finally have the Dark Brotherhood. You have memorable character Lucien Lachance. You also have your slew of little friendly dudes hanging out at the first guild hall and all that. It's hard to say otherwise, but the Dark Brotherhood is just excellent. It's maybe the best quest arc in all of Oblivion. It's probably the best quest arc in all of Oblivion. It does fantastic character work early on, and frankly through to the end, right? But it does fantastic character work with everybody hanging out at the guild hall underneath the well in Chaden Hall and all of that. Everyone has like they're all these sorts of like archetypical murderers. You know, they all have their weird quirks. Very much, once again, speaking of progenitors, very much like setting the standard for what would happen and how the Dark Brotherhood would be presented in Skyrim, right? This is very much like the blueprint of that, where there's a whole bunch of odd, kooky characters hanging around, and they all have their quirks, they all have different ways of approaching murder, and they all give you a lot of different advice on how to do murder. They're incredibly verbose, and it's super fun speaking to them about different jobs, which, speaking of the jobs themselves, it's super fun every time you get a bonus way to complete the job, you know? Once again, a blueprint for what would come in Skyrim with sort of bonuses for doing an assassination in a particular way. That exists here in Oblivion. Not for all of them, but at least for the early goings on. And then, of course, you get the shocking twist where you wipe out, you kill, everybody gets killed in the sanctuary. You do it, in fact, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You purify the sanctuary. And then Lucian shows up and is saying, like, you did good. I think we caught the person who was responsible for some of this sinister behavior within the Dark Brotherhood. Now you will take orders directly from me. And of course, everyone who has done the Dark Brotherhood at least once in this game knows that eventually with these dead drop orders, some of them are a little messed up. Some of them are a little bit different. And it works together so well because you tie into this disaffected former Dark Brotherhood member, right? The Lighthouse dude. Isn't he former Dark Brotherhood? He's very like hostile about the way in which they carry things out, and he's interested in exacting revenge, which you get to experience firsthand some of that heartbreak wherein he becomes a bit of a relatable character insofar as, and also the stuff with his own mother, right? But it becomes, you start to feel a degree of sympathy or empathy for him once you purify, once like the original sanctuary undergoes purification, because literally every single one of those characters in there is super likable and lovable. I think it does wonders for tying everything together. There's such a strong narrative through line of sort of like double crossing and just like wild pivots. And once again, like they do another cool twist with killing off Lucian, right? Which is frankly shocking as all hell when he's strung up, and the rest of the even higher ranking members, I think the Black Hand, they all show up, and they say, yeah, we got him. This was him. And you're like, holy shit, you got the wrong guy again. This is not him at all, right? It's so good. It is exceptional. It is exceptionally good. Also featuring one of the best quests in the entire game, I would say, is within the Dark Brotherhood quest arc, that being Whodunit, which has like a very satisfying and fun different amount of permutations to where you can solve the quest in different ways and sort of go about it in a fun way. And there's decent chunks of reactivity throughout, which, you know, by modern standards could have been a lot more, but by the standards of the time and of the game itself, really just such a wild amount of agency presented in that quest. Agency to like perform the quest in different ways, not just like having a bonus to like fulfill the quest in like, oh, dropping the taxidermied head on this dude sitting in a chair to kill him. You know, that's cool in and of itself and doesn't exist throughout everywhere. There should be more. It would be so cool if like the Mages Guild and Fighters Guild and Thieves Guild also had these bonus objectives. It's such a highlight of the Dark Brotherhood having being able to go the extra mile and do like the extra whatever you have to do. And in some ways, Skyrim Thieves Guild gets this by having the little extra item that you can find on every quest, and you go pick up like the golden beehive or whatever, right? And you bring that back. But it's not quite as cool as like the extra context sensitive interaction, you know, not quite as cool. But still, to take it back, Dark Brotherhood in Oblivion, unquestionably S rank. Unquestionably. I think it's such a high point, and the way in which you encounter it as well, when you murder someone and then Lucian just shows up in your sleep, if you manage to stay spoiler free, like you weren't watching, I don't know, G4 or something, or reading like the Prima guide, and you had no idea, and maybe you just accidentally killed someone, or you deliberately killed someone, you go to sleep, which the game requires you to do to level up, so there's a good chance that you do it. And it's such a fun surprise and treat. It's so enjoyable, I think. All right. That does it for our main slew of big guilds and all of that. But let's wrap up the rest of the core game with the arena. the arena in Oblivion sucks. It's so mediocre. How much can like 2 quests and maybe and I guess the vocal performances of Wes Johnson carry a quest arc? Not very much, I think. I don't think those things carry it that well. There's things to be said for it in a positive light. Like I said, you get to hear Wes Johnson doing his announcer voice and all of that, and that's very fun in a kind of cool, kitschy way. You get to have sort of a growing friendship with the people working down in the, what's it called again? The blood pit or the blood zone, the bleeding area, whatever it's called, underneath the arena. You sort of get new reactivity with them, and you're treated different ways. You start out like, you know, oh, he's mean to you at first, but you do more quests and he's good to you. He's nice. You're friends at the end. Right, which when I say it aloud, it sounds so kindergarten. Yeah, of course, you do more quests for this guy, he's going to be nicer to you, right? When I say it out loud, it sounds stupid. But things at the end with what's their name? What's their fighter name? The Gray Prince? Is that what I'm thinking of? Or the White Prince? The Snow Prince? No, the Snow Prince is something else. The orc dude who turns out to be part vampire. That is very fun. But I don't think those 2 quests, and one of which I think is optional, no? Is it optional to actually go and find the research and background on him? Or is that required? Either way, I don't think it makes or breaks. Yeah, it doesn't make or break the sort of mundanity of the rest of the arena. Which, I don't know, there's ways in which you could have played it up and made it more interesting. I can't help but try to think back to other times that there are quests that are similar to like an arena or like a fight pit or whatever in other games, and they try to pull it off a little bit better. The best example that I can think of, this is going to sound absurd, is maybe Rockville from Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door, which themed its like battle arena level all around wrestling and the WWE. I found that to be hilariously compelling, but there was cool stuff where after the big show, you kind of slunk around the grounds, right? You would, if this were like the equivalent in Oblivion, you would sneak around part of the Bloodworks. You would sneak around part of the Bloodworks, maybe go into some of the enemy team areas and talk with them. There would be some intrigue there. But here, it's so straightforward with every single damn fight until the end with the Grey Prince, I think is what their name is. It would have elevated it so much more if that existed for every fight. You know, if there were more memorable fights, aside from just like, this time you're fighting someone with a two-handed hammer. This time there's an archer in the back. Right? I don't know. It's not interesting at all. It's maybe the worst quest arc. You know, I don't want to mistake quality of questing with iconic questing, you know, because Lord knows the arena is very iconic. You get the creamy man, you get the adoring fan at the end and all of that with his fun creamy little hairdo, spouting off his own iconic lines and whatnot. But all of those things do not make for a very enjoyable quest arc in and of itself, you know? It's so straightforward. It's very mundane. It's very uninteresting until that final two quests. It's a D ranker. What can you do? All right. Let's round out the core game with Daedric quests. As I had said before, these I feel like shouldn't even be here because Daedric quests don't have a narrative through line, but I feel like I'm obligated to do this because if I don't, I will get a lot of comments from people who did not watch the video and only skip to the end and say, how come you didn't do Daedric quests on there? Right? We can do another video wherein we rank individual Daedric quests. We did that for Skyrim. But here, if I had to rank them, the amazing boon of the Daedric quests, the amazing advancement of the Daedric quests in Oblivion is that they're good again, right? If what I've heard is that Daedric quests in Daggerfall were super weird and cool and honestly difficult to activate because there were a lot of peculiar requirements as far as like in-game time passing to get these to activate. That is no longer the case here, and it wasn't the case in Morrowind. The only issue was in Morrowind is that there were very few Daedric quests. For it being a land that was before the Tribunal, Morrowind was supposedly dominated by Daedra worshippers, and yet the Daedric quests are extremely forgettable aside from like 2 of them, and they're also very few of them compared to Oblivion, compared to Skyrim, compared to the amount of Daedric princes that exist. Oblivion tries to get it back and does so pretty well, making sure that you go out to these shrines. I think Oblivion makes them a bit of it makes it a bit of a staple. It makes Daedric quests a staple in the Elder Scrolls once again, as it used to be with Daggerfall at the very least. You get these neat rewards, you do fun little bits of open world shenanigans. Sometimes you have to piss off like a guy who has recently been widowed. Sometimes you have to go deal with some vampires, which is maybe admittedly a little lackluster compared to some other stuff. The big worst, the most cardinal of sins that the Daedric quests in Oblivion commit is that they have to reuse a lot of assets, you know, and this was a problem with Oblivion at the time, and in some ways the arena quests suffered as well, wherein they couldn't fit everything onto the damn disc. There used to be an arena in every single major city in Oblivion, in Cyrodiil, but they cut them out because it just took too much space on the disc. And thus, you only get the one arena in the Imperial City. And frankly, the arena there looks very weird, right? If you've ever gone around the perimeter of it, it looks very weird how it looks kind of like it should be this enormous coliseum, but in truth, it's kind of small. It's contained within the walls of the Imperial City and does not match really anything else there. Aesthetically, it looks very weird. But that continues here with the Daedric quests, wherein for 2 or 3 of these Daedric quests, you specifically go to the Daedric Prince's associated realm, and it just looks like the Deadlands, you know? It is so unfortunate and so disappointing, especially if you have played Skyrim and you go back in time. It's a little disappointing when you roll up into, is it Vermina who has one wherein you enter their realm? Maybe Pereide as well. And it's just either exactly, Boethia is one for sure. You go to Boethia's and it's literally just the Deadlands. The setup is a little bit different, you know. All the assets are strewn about in a different way to make for the big fights that you have. But otherwise looks exactly the same as Mehrunes Dagon's The Deadlands. Very unfortunate. Really sucks. I don't know how much I should hold it against them, you know. I don't know. Because it's not really... on some level, it's not their fault because it was a technical limitation of the time. But at the same time, it sucks either way. You know, it sucks that it wasn't there. Bless up as well to the full conversion mod, Sky Oblivion. They're hoping to mend that. They're hoping to address that in some way, or in a major way, I should say. But that is neither here nor there. The Daedric quests, very fun, very cool, but unfortunate that they got the short end of the stick, you know, in that they didn't have any major cool, unique assets because they just didn't have the room for them. Anyway, I guess I'll just put Daedric quests on B. Like I said, I don't think they should be rated or ranked here. You know, I think that's a mistake. They're not a quest arc. You know, they're individual. They're like an anthology of quests. There's no narrative connectivity. There's no through line. It doesn't make sense when we have critiqued these other ones in a similar way. And the Daedric quests do not have that. You know, to make my case for wanting to exclude Daedric quests. But I'll always include them because I know folks, not to straw man this a little bit, but I know I will always get some folks being like, well, Daedric quests are a quest arc. They are not. All right. Let us head to the realms of DLC. We'll start with the Knights of the Nine, and we'll wrap things up with Shivering Isles. Knights of the Nine involves you getting into some greater lore, some greater Elder Scrolls lore, and actually, in truth, it does a whole lot to flesh out some unique Cyrodiilic lore, which is shockingly absent from the core game. In my most recent playthrough of Oblivion Remastered, I would frequently remark on and joke about how absurd it is that there are Minotaur in the game, and yet nobody ever acknowledges how weird that is, where they came from, anything about them really. I believe at most in the core game, there's no dialogue that refers to it, but it is roughly referred to in some of the in-game books about involvements with Elysia and Mora House, you know? It is so shocking that there is no, like, at least singular side quest devoted to some of the more weird wildlife, you know, wherein there's someone who's studying, like, doing archaeology on whatever, on Minotaur, right? Because there's other minor quest arcs, you know. There's the one where you have to gather up the stuff for, not Sindarian, who wants the Nirn root, but the guy who wants the Aliad statues and turns out to be like a super Aliad fascist right at the end. He's like an Aliad supremacist. It turns out, which I was partly tempted to include that and stuff like Mazoga as quest arcs here, but I wouldn't consider them major quest arcs. You know, they're more so relegated to the realm of side questing. You know, there does exist stuff like that in Oblivion, and I do enjoy that there's not just major quest arcs and then scattered side quests. I do appreciate that there's like something of a middle ground where there's like a chain of 2 or 3 quests related to this super minor faction, like the Knights of the Thorn or the White Stallion, I think in the case of Mazoga, stuff like that. But either way, the Knights of the Nine main quest, I think I very much enjoy it. I think it knows what it's setting out to do and does it with flying colors. I love the idea of traveling out, assembling all of these ancient relics, and for each relic you have to do some weird, fun, kooky whatever, you know? It's very much reminiscent of Daedra questing, which makes sense. Daedra quests are like such a highlight of people playing these games. It makes sense that they would want to try and like have it again, you know? And I think they pull it off pretty well. There's a lot of cool ways of looking at, okay, the Aedra maybe sometimes aren't super cool. Why did they curse this guy to be basically emaciated and these gloves are on the floor and all of that? It's very incredible. It affords a very nuanced look at the 9 divines. You also get a very cool look at a villainous Daedra, that being Meridia. I think Meridia absolutely rocks aesthetically, and Meridia here being the villain, or not the villain, obviously that's Umaril, but being like a villainous force, and her Daedra being utilized here, the Borealises? I forgot what they're called. Something along those lines. I very much love them on like an aesthetic level. I don't know, I always enjoy when there's like this sort of vaguely like angelic enemy type or whatever. You know, like Doom Eternal did this. Shit, it crops up in fiction a lot, but I do personally enjoy it on, like I said, on a personal level. I think the stuff with Pelinal is super cool and weird and fun, right? It harkens back to some of the wild, weird stories of Morrowind, which go figure, given the involvement of Kirkbride. But all in all, I really enjoy Knights of the Nine and sort of like assembling your little team at the Priory. I think it's very fun. And there's also a bit of like intriguing world reactivity where sometimes I think the chapels can continue to come under attack while you haven't finished Knights of the Nine, right? I think it can come under attack again. The only downside is, well, I don't know about the only downside, but one of the downsides that is perhaps the most memorable and sticks with people a lot is if you decide to do it on your character, if you do even one little crime, like you steal a wheel of cheese and then you do the time or whatever, or you have in some way infamy logged on your character, I think that's the crucial statistic there. Everyone is like, I used to think you were a hero, but now you're a sinner just like the rest of us, right? If you have even a modicum of infamy, you get treated to that. And obviously that sucks if you're trying to play like a do-gooder character, but it's also just kind of annoying. It's also just kind of annoying. And of course you get locked out of all the incredible relics and stuff if you actually want to utilize them. But otherwise, I don't know. I don't think the drawbacks are that rough, you know, and I don't mind them personally that bad. I very much enjoyed Knights of the Nine. I like it quite a bit. And like I said, I think it contributes some necessary world building that's Cyrodiil-centric when the core game is so much lacking in that. Like, so much of it is focused on the Oblivion crisis, you know? You get so little of it. I very much appreciate this being a little bit more Cyrodiilic focused, hearkening back to the first Tamrielic Empire, all that stuff with Pelinal, Alessia, and whatnot. If anything, I wish that there was more of it. I wish there was more of that stuff. Yeah. I'm a fan of it. I think it's an A rank. I don't think it quite ascends to S rank because the quests themselves aren't always super duper wild. Like there's always just like a fixed solution to them, but I do enjoy it. All right. And finally, we come to the Shivering Isles main quest, which, you know, the Shivering Isles main quest is the main thing you go to the Shivering Isles and get to see. I think the side questing experience in the Shivering Isles is shockingly lackluster. There's very little. And most of the fun of questing in the Shivering Isles is done through the main quest. There's a few bits of intriguing player agency where sometimes you choose like the more manic or the oh my gosh, what's the other one? Mania and what is the other one? Oh my god, how am I blanking? Dementia, of course, ironic. The more manic or demented option, where sometimes things play out slightly differently. There's of course also the quest involving the Dark Seducers and Golden Saints, which has a few permutations in which you can solve that. All in all, it's pretty fun. I enjoy it quite a bit. My big gripe with the Shivering Isles main quest sort of stems from my gripes with Sheogorath as a character, because I do not actually like Sheogorath that much. I find his whole shtick to be tiring at best and offensive at worst. I don't enjoy it. I think the most interesting aspect of Sheogorath is severely underexplored in the Shivering Isles, and we get very little time to dwell on it after the big reveal of Sheogorath being, oh my gosh, what's their name? What is their name? The big crystalline dude. Jiggalag. I had to jog my memory a little bit. But yeah. The big revelation about Jiggalag, I think there is some cool narrative storytelling there where you could work with like losing a sense of self, losing yourself in such a way, change, all of that cool stuff. There's some fun themes that you could play around with, but they hardly really ever mess with that. A lot of it sort of just comes back to being played for laughs, especially concerning Sheogorath, the character himself. So much of it is just played for laughs, and it's kind of unfortunate that way. When it's brimming with potential, and it's for the most part it's untapped. I do enjoy a lot. It's filled to the brim with set pieces and stuff. There's so much cool stuff. It's difficult to even rank it amongst these because obviously it's a DLC. This is the same thing we brought up during the Skyrim quest arc situation. It's difficult to rank these major DLCs because, you know, so much work went into the storytelling and all of that. You know, Knights of the Nine, thanks to the like corner cutting involved there, it does actually in some ways measure up against the rest of the game, and it meshes very well with the rest of the game. Shivering Isles really feels like a damn expansion, you know? And because of that, it's hard to not, even with my personal hangups, as a whole, the main quest experience in the Shivering Isles is just excellent. It's hard to not rank it S rank, you know? There's just so much agency, so much going on. Even with not enjoying Sheogorath as a character, there's other characters that are in some ways enjoyable. Like, I absolutely love Haskell. Jiggalag is in a lot of ways very interesting, though in some ways a force of nature, but Jiggalag doesn't suffer from being reduced to like being a force of nature. Less a character, more a force of nature. Jiggalag doesn't suffer from that as much as Mehrunes Dagon does in the core game. The mystery and twist is very satisfying the first time through. They tease it fair enough throughout. all in all, I really enjoy it. And I think there's also a cool exploration of self, right? Wherein a critique could be levied at the player, and they could have done more with this, but sort of the player becoming desensitized to the madness of the world, which, you know, madness is just like a catch-all term, but like wanton violence, just stealing from people, right? As the longer you play this game, sort of the less you start to care. See also HBO's Westworld, or also see also New Game Plussing in Starfield, huh? Bet you didn't think of this one. Starfield actually gets a lot into the philosophical questions about exactly this, really. I'm not going to talk about and spoil a lot here, but New Game Plussing in Starfield does take sort of a metatextual analysis and puts under a microscope some of what's going on inside of the player's psyche the more you play these types of games. You know, the more you explore or have a desire to explore, and the way in which you treat the NPCs. It's fascinating. And I feel like the Shivering Isles sort of touches on it a bit, but it could have been even better as you sort of transform into Sheogorath. I do love the idea of that and sort of framing it in like a diegetic way. A way that makes more sense within the game world, I should say, to clarify, to define that. I think it's good. It could have been better. Sheogorath could have been better. Very memorable, fan favorite character, but like I said, I don't care for him. All right, I think that ought to do it. That ought to do it for our ranking here. I like where this looks. Honestly, I'm surprised I ranked the main quest so low. I thought it would be a little bit higher, but man, the more I got talking about, the more I was just thinking like, I just do not care for it. I thought it would be like a B rank at worst. Yeah, what a letdown. I don't really care for the main quest of Oblivion as much as I enjoy some of the three major protagonist-esque characters. It's just not much going on. And there's also, what's her name? The Countess of Bruma, who it seems like maybe there was cut content between her and Martin Septim, or you, the player character, where, lest we forget, she's like, you promise Martin's hand in marriage to her at the end of that quest arc, and then nothing really comes of that, right? I guess they don't seal the deal with a marriage ceremony just yet, so she doesn't become Empress. But that would have been wild. That would have been very interesting as like a follow-up, given the state of Martin and the Empire at the end. But you don't really get any of that. It's completely devoid of most intrigue, you know? And what intrigue is there, I don't find terribly compelling with what the Mythic Dawn is doing. And also it's kind of a situation of been there, done that when it comes to the main quest of Morrowind, having been there and done that with like sleeper agents and a cult and all that business. All right, that ought to do it. As I had mentioned before, feel free to submit your own requests for ranking videos just like this. Until next time, please take care of each other.